In for Ben McLaughlin tonight, who's off for a couple of weeks. Spend a little time with his new daughter, Kennedy. We're so glad you're spending some of your time with us here tonight. Thank you so much. Got a busy show ahead for you. Major League Baseball underway after a lot of discussion. They shut down spring training in March, and here they go. Tonight, the Nationals and the Yankees about ready to play. The Nationals, the defending World Series champions, and yet none of the brain trust of the Husker Sports Network picks them to win their division. Not one of us picked the defending champs to win a division. How about that?
I couldn't quite bring myself to pencil them in, and I'm not really sure why. I mean, I guess we all unanimously side with the Braves, I think, in that division. So
we did.
The Braves are just so stacked for talent, and with this weird 60-game schedule, I mean, what happens if Trey Turner comes down with coronavirus, and then how does that impact things? And it's a sprint, not a marathon this year. And so, I mean, I could just easily see. I mean, and also I don't know if they actually ended up expanding the playoff as well, so you could see them getting the wild card spot and still going on to win it all. I wouldn't put it out of the realm possibility, but just in terms of division winner, Braves, I guess.
And Juan Soto does have COVID-19, so he's out for a while. He tested positive the other day, so a guy who a lot of people think will be an MVP in the National League at some point in time in his career is going to miss the first couple of weeks of the season. But baseball's underway. They did approve this afternoon expanded playoffs. They're going to go to 16 teams. The first and second place teams from each division are going to get in, and then the next two best records get in, and then the top seeds get to pick who they want to play in the first round. Some oddity to all this. It makes some sense to me because let's say you're a fan of the Cleveland Indians. Well, the Indians don't play anybody from the American League East. They don't play the Yankees and the Rays, who might be the two best teams in the American League. You don't play them at all in your 60 games. So I think you got to give the teams that have the best record a little bit of an edge up. So that'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds, and it does start tonight. Want to jump right into some college football talk. Tomorrow is a big NCAA Board of Governors meeting where they're going to talk. They may or may not decide about what to do with the fall championship. So we're talking about volleyball and soccer, cross country, those sports that the NCAA oversees at the Division I level for the fall. They could table it for a couple weeks and kind of see what the medical side of things looks like in a couple weeks, or they could make a decision to move those sports to the spring. My gut tells me they're going to move it to the spring. So how does that factor in FBS football for the Cornhuskers? Well, right now, Bill Moose and the Omaha World-Herald and Tom Chattel have a piece up. Tom talked to the Husker athletic director this afternoon, and Moose is going to be watching that meeting tomorrow very carefully. He did say, quote, if they say there aren't going to be any fall championships in the NCAA, just from my observation, would there then be a college football playoff? Moose says this. Moose then said, does he expect college football to happen in the 5 big conferences this fall? He said, I think so. I think there's some conferences that are absolutely going to play. Every day the complexion of the college football season is changing. Some of these decisions are probably going to be audibles when we get into this. It begins somewhat tomorrow with this decision or possible decision from the Board of Governors. We've kicked this down the road about as far as we can go. So there's the latest from Bill Moose. It starts tomorrow with this meeting, Tim. We're starting to come up to some hard deadlines where I think some decisions are going to have to be made.
Yeah, and it's always – right now you're kind of stuck between a bad decision and an even worse decision. There really isn't a perfect way to kind of get out of this, and I think that – probably my gut feeling, this isn't me, this is me reading the tea leaves, not me eavesdropping. I was ever a fly on the wall during any of these conversations, but I do imagine we will see a suspension of fall championships, meaning that the FBS has their own, obviously, the playoff. The NCAA doesn't control that, but from an optics standpoint, you probably couldn't just say, oh, we're going to have our playoff anyway if the NCAA comes out and shuts down fall championships. Now, that being said, I'm still pretty confident we're going to see some football. And the reason being is that you can't really move football to the spring and then turn around and play in the fall. I mean, I guess technically speaking, you could do that, but I think that's a big ask for a sport as physical as football to ask those guys to play that close together, and you certainly wouldn't want to permanently move football to the spring. That wouldn't make any sense. So it seems to me that most of the sports, the fall sports, are probably going to get kicked down to the spring, and then we're going to see at least some football. And who knows, maybe they get into the season and they shorten it by even more games than we originally thought. Maybe they only play 6 or 7 games. But I would anticipate to see some football played, even if there is no fall championship, even if there is no playoff or bowl games. I would expect to see just a little bit of football, and I guess that's what we're all kind of holding out hope for, is just some football.
Well, and Bill Moose does say that later on in the thing, that, I at some point in time he thinks that they could get some games in during the fall. And you're right. I think what it looks like right now on July 23rd, it may look completely different by September 1, and it could look completely different by November 5th. I mean, all of these things can change. We've gone through peaks and valleys with this virus. I mean, we thought we kind of had it under control in May, and then it kind of spiked back up. I think I'm not a doctor, but I think it's because people have started traveling again. People have been out, starting to do some things, and so they're not sitting in their apartments or sitting in their houses or sitting in their condos. They're out kind of mingling, and it's spreading around a little bit. So stay tuned. We'll obviously be watching with everybody tomorrow on the Board of Governors meeting. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the commissioners are going to do for the Power 5 for football, but it will have implications for the sport of volleyball, which I know we have a lot of Husker volleyball fans and want to know what's going to be happening with that sport as we move through. All right, here's what we have coming up this hour. Busy hour ahead. We're going to do both linebacker coaches tonight. So we're going to hear from Barrett Ruud, then we'll hear from Mike Dawson, then we'll grade out where we think the Husker linebacking core fits in the Big Ten West. We went offensive line the other night, Tim, which I think can be a strength for this football team, not only this year but moving down the road. We're probably going to an area of this football team where the biggest question marks reside, is that Husker linebacking core.
Yeah, the linebacker core is interesting to me, and I think Nebraska actually does have a quietly solid core of guys. The question is there depth there? So right now, as I see it, you're going to have Will Honus, Cole Miller at the inside linebacker spot, and then on the outside linebacker spot, you're going to have Caleb Tanner, who still has to prove himself a little bit. I think a lot of guys are optimistic about where he'll be at, but still probably has to prove himself a little bit. And then you have JoJo Domann, who is also playing in that kind of nickel role. And so I think you're pretty comfortable with that core of guys. And then you also have Garrett Nelson, who plays with his hair on fire. He's like the little engine that could. He's always running around, and he actually got a lot better and more confident as the season progressed. And with even more time in the weight room, I have full confidence in Garrett Nelson's ability as a linebacker. And so I think you're pretty comfortable, Greg, with that core of guys. And I think just the question is, if there are people who contract coronavirus or go down with just injuries, then what do you do there? And also, the defensive line's a big part of this as well. I think if you see a guy like Ben Stille have a great year, it's gonna make it a lot easier on those outside linebackers to get after the quarterback. Because that's the thing that Nebraska really has been missing, is getting pressure on the quarterback. That's been a problem for a decade plus. Ever since Ndamukong Suh left campus, you've had issues getting after the quarterback. So if Nebraska can get any type of pass rush, any type of pressure at all on the quarterback this year, I think the defense is going to have a lot of success.
No doubt. All right, so busy hour. A lot of linebacker talk coming your way in the next few minutes of the program. So when we come back, Barrett Ruud will be our first coach up as we talk Husker linebackers on our position breakdown. So go away.
Tonight on Sports Nightly, it's the Husker football position breakdowns.
2nd and 11 from the 3. Stretch play left to Young. He's hit in the backfield and dropped. He'll lose another yard. Back to the 2-yard line. Colin Miller through that time. Sets up 3rd down and 12.
Tonight,
Lejean in at quarterback for Maryland. Looking at 3rd and 9 now at the 30-yard line. Lejean gets the snap. Gets hit, dropped. Oh, what a sack. Big-time hit by JoJo Domann back at the 21-yard line. Domann's 2nd sack of the year.
outside linebackers coach Mike Dawson and inside linebackers coach Barrett Ruud.
Well, let's talk about these inside linebackers with Husker inside linebackers coach Barrett Ruud. And, you know, the first 2 years you've been at Nebraska, Coach, I think maybe you've kind of been able to get by week to week because of just a lack of numbers. Do you feel more closer to being a whole room now here in year 3?
Yeah, most definitely, especially from the depth standpoint. It's probably the first year where you really feel good about, not just your first group you throw out there, but, the second and possibly third group as well. Now you're starting to have guys that have been in the system going on their third year. Not only the system defensively, but just the overall program, understanding how we want guys to work, how to prepare. So as far as overall room, it's definitely the most comfortable I've been.
Well, you've been able to have a guy like Muhammad Berry who's been so solid for you the last couple of years. He's now graduated and moved on. So the two graybeards in that room would be Colin Miller and Will Honus. Tell me about what you need to see from those guys, and what do you expect to see from those guys on a day-to-day basis?
Well, starting with Will, I really expect him to have a good year. Number one, because he's a full year removed from having surgery and being 100% healthy. I think sometimes people overlook, when you have an injury like he had, an ACL, it really takes a full year to really get that out of your system, in my opinion. And he really did a good job gutting through that last year. But, he felt it, in certain days of practice. And, that can definitely have an effect on you. So having him 100% healthy, and then plus the fact that he's now been here 3 years and really knows what we expect of him, I'm really excited to see what he can do this year. Colin really is very similar, not from the injury standpoint, but this is now his third year really being an inside linebacker, which is really good as well. He went from a guy that originally was an outside linebacker his whole life and came over right before the fall of 2018 and didn't really get to play a whole lot because he was still learning how to play the position in 2018. But 2019, he got to play a lot of football. And I expect him to completely just build on what he did last year. He's a really intelligent guy, intelligent football player. And now with, once again, a couple years under his belt playing the position, I'm really excited for him to be able to put it all together in his senior year.
Tell me a little bit more about Colin. He seems to be a guy that it means a lot to him. I see a lot of emotion from him, whether it's out on the field or on the sidelines. What about him as a person?
Yeah, he's a pretty passionate football player. I don't think any of our guys are like extremely vocal, but he's one of the more vocal guys we have. Good communicator. Like I said, very intelligent, good communicator, which is really essential at that spot. You got to have somebody that's comfortable lining guys up and running the show and telling guys where to go. And he really, I think, especially last year, really got a good grasp of that. His first year, he was really starting to learn how to do that because when you play the outside linebacker spot, it's the exact opposite. You're getting told what to do. Where now as the inside linebacker, you got to tell people what to do. And so now he really has a high comfort level for that. And then now I think where you're going to really see him flash the most is just his overall movements and, techniques at the position physically. I think mentally he's got a great grasp of it. Verbally, he can run the show. And now physically, I think his movements are all where they need to be to really have a good year.
Visiting again with Husker inside linebackers coach Barrett Ruud here in our position breakdown of the Huskers inside backers. Last year, you added 3 scholarship linebackers to the room as freshmen, and they for different reasons. Nick Henrich was a guy that I know you're really excited about, but he battled some injuries throughout the fall. Jackson Hanna and Garrett Snodgrass. How about the progress of those 3 guys, and what do you expect out of them?
Yeah, starting with Nick, it was a big disappointment for not only him, but for us too, that he got injured in spring practice because, you saw him starting to really come on when he did get hurt in spring. I am glad that it happened when it did because now he did preserve that redshirt year as opposed to doing it, in game 6 or something like that midseason. So he's had a full, year or so to really recover from that surgery, and he's 100% full go. He's gained 25 pounds since he's been here. And you're right. He's a guy I've always been extremely high on. Ever since, watching his high school tape. He's as advertised. And now it's just a matter of him, continuing to push and continue to develop because he's got all the tools, needed to be a really, really good football player for a long time. Now it's just a matter of him continuing to develop and push himself on a daily basis.
Garrett Snodgrass, coach's son, Jackson Hanna from Tennessee, guys that should be getting more of a handle of your system and what you kind of want out of those guys.
Yeah, Garrett, you said coach's son. And it's easy to see why. He's easily one of our sharpest players. He knows the defense in and out already as a freshman, which is really a credit to him because he didn't get the reps, that a lot of the guys did early on. I mean, there's just limited reps to go around, especially when he was coming in, for fall camp. And he's a guy that really maximized each rep that he got, and he continued that throughout the winter and the spring practices that he did get. He really has a good grasp of the defense, which is always going to be really important for him because he's continuing to develop from an athletic standpoint, but he's always going to be a guy that I think is going to be on the elite level of just knowledge of the system and understanding football. So he's really a valuable guy for our room. And then Jackson's a guy that, I think it was important for him to get that redshirt year last year to really be able to come in. Sort of like old school Nebraska football, we really made use of that redshirt year for a long time around here, and guys made huge jumps in the weight room, which translated to the field. And that's what we're looking for from him, is hopefully that redshirt year really translates from what he did with Zach in the weight room to what you're going to see out on the field.
You added, Coach, a couple of guys, scholarship backers in this most recent recruiting class, Va Clements, a junior college player, and Keyshawn Green. What can you tell the folks about those two additions?
Yeah, Va, I'm not going to go real in-depth on his background story because one day that story is going to come out as really one of the cooler stories I've ever heard. But he's a kid that I have zero doubt his best football is in front of him. I mean, 2 years ago he was a 5'11", 165-pound cornerback, and now, after about a half year in the program, he's a 6'1", 210, 215-pound linebacker. So he's got a lot of raw natural ability. His dad's a high school football coach in near the San Francisco area. So he's a football guy. He loves football. A great guy to be around, great guy to have in the room, and he's really done a nice job of picking things up, coming in here from the junior college system. So I wish he would have had a full spring to really see what he can do with pads on, but I think he's really got a good future for us here.
A corner, right? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he's from America Samoa.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I don't want to get too in-depth on the story because it's pretty cool and he needs to tell the whole thing. But, he came over here basically not knowing anybody right after high school and just wanted to play football. And, like I said, he was a 5'11" corner, and now he's a 6'1" linebacker. So I really do think his best football is ahead, and he's still learning the position, but loves the game and really works at it.
How about Keyshawn? What attracted you to him, and what have you seen for him with a month or so on the ground in Lincoln?
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously you watch his high school film. He's a fabulous athlete, really a natural player at the position. And the key for him, man, is just every day it's got to be a process of getting better. And he's a guy that he's got to come in and learn the system. Obviously, a normal offseason really would have helped him being able to have more time with him in person to teach him the system. But he's a guy that I think we're counting on right away to contribute somewhere on the field. Whether it's special teams, I think he can be a dynamic kick cover guy, dynamic punt cover guy. He's a guy that I think can really be an anchor for our special teams early on, and then hopefully more and more we can get him on the field and let him use his skills.
Very good. Barrett Root again with us as we start our position breakdowns here on Sports Nightly on the Husker Sports Network. Your room's always got some young walk-on linebackers. We've seen some make a big dent for Husker football down through the years. Last year, Luke Reimer flashed some things for you. The youngster out of North Star High School, Joey Johnson from up in Gretna's, had some moments for you. What about some of the walk-on kids that you're excited about in your room?
Yeah, you mentioned, Luke Reimer was probably had as good of a camp as anybody on the whole team, really. As a guy that really was pretty unknown and a guy that showed up, for summer workouts and, really he was learning on the fly, but he's one of those guys that, it's exactly what you tell a guy to do is, hey, if you don't know quite what you're doing, go real fast and figure it out on the fly. And he absolutely does that. He really has a natural feel for football. In North Star, he played about 15 positions out of need. And I think he's found a home for us here at inside linebacker. And I really think he's got the potential to be a, big-time player, not just at Nebraska, but, around the conference as well. So really excited about him. And then, we've got some guys that have started to be in the system for a little bit, the Joe Johnsons and Chris Cassidys, that, really understand what we're looking for, really are hard workers, and just want Nebraska to be really good. And that's what the elite walk-ons that I've been around are like. They'll do anything for the team. They can't wait to play special teams. Know both inside linebacker spots, inside and out, so really excited about them as well.
Well, Coach, we appreciate, as always, the breakdown of your room. It's going to be a group I think it's going to continue to grow as we get through this 2020 season and beyond. Keep them healthy as once you get start working out and doing more hitting on the field. Keep them healthy, and let's get this thing cranked up.
Absolutely. We're excited about it.
There he is, Barrett Ruud with us. Join us on our Sports Only Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Thursday night, double dose of our position breakdowns. As far as coaches, we're still dealing with the same position with the linebackers. The Huskers break it up by having Barrett Ruud coach the inside backers and Mike Dawson the outside linebackers. Mike Dawson back after taking a year to go to the NFL with the New York Giants. When he was here 2 years ago, he was the defensive line coach, but now back to handle the outside linebackers. And he joins us now on our Woodhouse Auto Family Sports Only Hotline. Coach, great to have you back. Are you settled in? What is it like being back in Lincoln?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, we got back a couple of months ago, and just getting everything settled and getting the house the way we want it and situated and getting back to town has been really great. So everybody's happy we're back from our end, and looking forward to getting everything back to kind of status quo.
Well, let's dive into the outside backer room, and two names that would jump out at Husker fans would be Caleb Tanner and JoJo Doman. What about their progress as players, and what are you going to need out of those guys in this season?
Yeah, we're expecting a lot of big things from a bunch of guys in the room, but I'll start with JoJo first. He's a guy that's made some really big plays, and I think he's doing a good job of kind of fine-tuning the details to play in and play out a little bit more consistently, and be able to make those plays and kind of, be able to be a guy that sits in the defense and does all the jobs necessary. He's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. He's a guy that, has had some DB experience, so he can go out and cover, and he's also big enough, strong enough where he can set an edge for you like a linebacker. So we're going to need a lot out of him this year.
And Caleb Tanner is certainly a guy that looks like he has all the physical tools. And he's shown flashes in his young Husker career, but I think we all know there's more to Caleb.
Yeah, I think that Caleb is a guy that we've talked about not being a flash guy. You're going to be a guy that's a play-in, play out every down guy, and he's got the tools. He's got great length. He's got good athleticism, and he's a guy that can go forward and rush the quarterback. He can also do a little bit in coverage, so that's a bonus for a guy like that, and as far as being able to drop and be a linebacker type of guy. So he's just got to tie it all in, and he had to play as a young guy, and I think hopefully that experience over the last 2 years leads to something that ends up being pretty good for us this year.
Coach, another young man that Husker fans kind of glommed onto pretty quick was Garrett Nelson. They loved his energy, his passion for the game. What have your observations of Garrett been?
Yeah, he's an easy guy to fall in love with, especially from the Cornhusker standpoint. If there's someone in the program that bleeds Cornhusker red, it's certainly Garrett. It's super important to him. I know that he brings great passion and brings physicality as a guy that plays as a true freshman. It's not easy to play that position as a true freshman, and he was able to log a decent amount of reps. And same thing, I think that playing at the Big Ten level as a true freshman, I think that leads to later on in your career being able to have some experience behind you and gain knowledge and just keep on improving every single time you get a chance to step out on the field.
Yeah, we're visiting with Husker outside linebackers coach Mike Dawson here in our position breakdown of the outside linebacker spot. Two young guys who redshirted last year. Javen Wright, who was brought in as a defensive back, going to try to move his way up like JoJo Doman did to the outside backer spot. And Jamin Graham, who also redshirted last year. And I know you had a couple of practices with them back in March. What impressions did those guys leave with you?
Yeah, well, James did a great job of kind of just feeling his way a little bit into the position and kind of getting going that way. And Did a pretty good job with learning how to set the edge and being able to kind of be a guy that's able to use his length. And there's a couple good clips of him really in that, couple no padded practices are showing some physicality, which is good to see from a young guy. So that certainly was positive.
Also, you couple of incoming freshmen. One you had in the spring in Blaze Gunnarsson, and the other is Jamari Butler, who just got here this summer as well. Your thoughts about two young players that maybe have an impact for you moving forward?
Yeah, well, very excited about both of those guys. They both are good-sized guys with great length. Had a chance to be around Blaze a little bit more, obviously, with him coming in at the mid-year. And he's been a good guy to kind of start to get to work with, get your hands on him. Although he, just kind of was getting back into it a little bit when we started the spring ball. So, I'm looking forward to getting both those guys on the field. I know that the Zoom meetings are we kind of everybody's been talking about that, and for new guys coming in and learning, and you can meet about it and draw it on the board and show them some film, and you kind of have the interactive, hey, you got this, you got that, and they kind of say, yeah. And, I mean, not many times guys are going to sit there and say, no, I don't got you. So, it's going to be good to get them out on the field and start getting both of those guys reps, Jamari and, obviously keep moving forward with Blaze. So I think it's going to be important to get both those guys out on the field and really dig into it and see what they can do.
Another addition to your room in this past recruiting class is a junior college player in Nico Cooper. And I think a lot of people expect, okay, junior college player, you got to come in and make an impact right away. Some do. Some take a little more time to cook and get ready to go. What about Nico Cooper? What at least of his junior college tape, what did you like about him?
Yeah, the thing about Nico, and the same thing, kind of more interacting with him over those Zoom meetings. He's a guy, very likable personality. I think Cornhusker fans are going to really like him. He's very intense about his football. He's very prideful on what he's done so far, and at the same time wanting to get better and better and better. So, another guy that I'm looking forward to getting. Obviously, his tape showed some good ability to rush the quarterback, and he's a big, long guy when you get to meet him, and big old hands, and he'll be able to put his hands on people, be physical and strike, and do a good job in the run game for us. And then with that, flip the switch and go rush the quarterback. So it's going to be a lot of fun getting to work with Nico.
David Alston's another guy in your room. He's been a part of the program for a couple of years. He would have been here when you were here a couple of years ago. And then you've got some walk-ons, Coach. Obviously, your room's always going to have walk-ons. Simon Odie was a guy that got on the field some last year. But I know your room is more than just the scholarship guys, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we got a good mix of guys. Really, it's personality-wise in the room is really good. The guys that are smart and, I've said before, at this position, you got to have some flexibility. One down, you might be playing like a safety, and then the next down, you're playing like a D lineman. So, and never mind playing linebacker in between. But these guys are good guys that want to work hard, and they're here for the right reasons, and it's real important to them. So we got to get them all, chance to get a role on this team and get a chance to keep proving themselves day in and day out. And that's the good news, especially when you come in with kind of a fresh start with a new position coach. That's a clean slate. Last year was last year, but everybody's got to prove it every single day. So hopefully it breeds some good competition, and guys can't be complacent because we do have a lot of depth and we do have a lot of numbers with guys. So hopefully that creates a little bit of competition and a little bit of hunger with these guys every single rep of practice. I try to tell them all the time, each rep that they get is like a piece of gold. They got to take that rep as serious as they can, and it's not okay just to kind of go out there and go through the motions in a practice, because that one's going to be over. You're never going to get that chance again. So we got to make every single rep count, and I think these guys are hungry to do that.
Well, Coach, we appreciate the time. Let's get this thing underway, and hopefully we can play some football and watch these guys on the field here in a few months.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
Mike Dawson, Husker outside linebacker coach. He joined us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. All right, phone lines are open. 866-HUSKER, 1-866-487-5371. Give you a chance to give us your thoughts about what you heard from Coaches Ruud and Dawson, and we'll rank out where we think the Husker linebackers fit in the Big Ten West. All that coming up next. Thursday night, A lot of linebacker talk this hour. We heard from both Barry Ruud, the inside backers coach, and Mike Dawson, the outside linebackers coach. Tim, you were listening intently. What stood out to you as you heard both those guys?
Yeah, I think they had a lot of interesting things to say, and I really liked the mention of Luke Reimer. He's a guy who a lot of Husker fans think are fans of, not just because he's a in-state type of guy, but I think that he has that potential to be one of those, I don't know, kind of sleeper guys who you don't normally jump out at you when you think about the linebacker spot. But and correct me if I'm wrong, I think last year he had, or maybe it was the year before, no, it was last year, I think, where he had that amazing play there on special teams where I think he actually forced a fumble or recovered a fumble. So he's got a motor to him. And so he's one of the guys that are really interesting. And then you talk, too, about some of the transfers, some of the new guys, bodies, and people who you think can make kind of an immediate impact. And so you talked a little bit about Nico Cooper, and he's a guy who you think that if there is a question of depth, because that's one of the things I mentioned at the top of the show, is I wasn't super sure depth-wise where you're going to draw on the linebacker spot. But Nico Cooper is one of those guys at outside linebacker who Nebraska, I think, probably feels pretty comfortable about. And also Mike Dawson as well. He's got an interesting story, of course, because he was a D-line coach, goes to the Giants, now comes back as the outside linebackers coach. And he's a guy, too, Greg, who, at 2018, I was immediately impressed with his unit, the defensive linemen, and how they rotated guys in, and I was impressed with that unit. Then you lose him, of course, and I know Frost was upset to see him go, of course, and now you have him back, and so that's really an interesting dynamic, is to have a guy who already knows the coaches so well and the culture and everything. So I'm really curious about the outside linebacker group. I think it's an exciting group and should be fun to watch.
Yeah, Caleb Tanner needs to be a star. It's time for him to go. And, Nick, you're right. I'm glad you mentioned Nico Cooper, because I think that's a prospect a lot of Husker fans are intrigued by. But we got to see it. We got to see what it is. I mean, his junior college tape was lights out. If he can translate that from junior college ball to the Big Ten level, could be a special thing. Time will be the ultimate judge. All right, let's dive into the rankings of this. Okay, Tim, let's give me your 1, 2, and 3 for the linebackers.
So, oddly enough, my number one, I've got Northwestern, and the reason being is that they have every single guy coming back. You got Patty Fisher, Blake Gallagher, who led the team in tackles last year, and you have Chris Beglin, who's another returning starter. So they returned that core. In Northwestern, their offense was anemic, to put it mildly, last year, but their defense is always pretty solid. So all those returning starters, good enough for the Wildcats at number one. And then my number two, of course, I've also got, and this is a really weird pick, but I got Illinois. Kind of a similar deal where they're returning a lot of guys, and I don't know, maybe I'm just a big Lovie Smith fan. I'm all aboard the Illini bandwagon, but when you're bringing back Jake Hansen and Milo Eifler, I think that they'll be solid there. And then at number 3, that's where I do have Nebraska. I think that because you have guys like Caleb Tanner, Will Honus, and you also have JoJo Doman, I think that there's just enough there. Again, like you mentioned, there's guys like Nico Cooper as well, or maybe even a Keyshawn Green if they're ready to throw him out there. Guys that are in the wings who have yet to prove it. So depth is a little bit of a concern, but in terms of that core 4, I think that Nebraska good enough for my number 3.
Okay, so you go Northwestern 1, Illinois 2, Nebraska 3.
And Nebraska 3.
All right, Austin, jump in here.
All right, so I line up with Tim on the first couple. I think Northwestern's linebacking core has a pretty solid claim to best in the country in that Fisher, Gallagher, Bergen, Troika, and a little bit of depth behind him as well. Pretty clearly number 1 for me. Illinois at number 2 as well, with Eifler and Hansen are good, and they also have a JUCO guy coming in, LeVar Gardner. He could be pretty big. Losing Dele Harding is an issue, but I think they've got enough to deal with it. And speaking of losing good players, Wisconsin, they're still my number 3, but they lose Chris Orr and Zach Bond. They have Jack Sanborn back. He'll be a junior, led the way with 80 tackles last year, and plenty of other guys that have played enough snaps that I trust the Wisconsin track record to be solid as well. So I go Northwestern, Illinois, and Wisconsin in my top 3.
All right, my 3, I'm with you with Northwestern. I love all 3 of those. Patty Fisher, can't believe he's still around. He has just been a stud in this league since he was a freshman, finally a senior now. Gallagher, as Tim mentioned, led the team in tackles, and then Bergen. So they've got all 3 of those And I think that's enough to make them number one. I do have the Badgers at 2. Sanborn, to me, is an all-conference linebacker. Noah Burks is one of their outside backers. I think he's a really good player. They just seem to like their offensive line. They just seem to stockpile those guys and have more ready and really good talented guys behind them. And so until I'm proven wrong on that, I'm going to still rate them pretty high. And my 3 is a team that hasn't been mentioned. I'm going to Iowa at 3. Nick Niemann's a senior linebacker who's been a really good player in this league. Colbert is another guy that's played an awful lot of football. So there's plenty of experience for them at the linebacker spot. And Iowa's linebackers traditionally are the heart and soul of their football team. So I go Northwestern 1, Wisconsin 2, Iowa 3. Austin, how about our absentee votes?
All right, so on the Ben McLaughlin front, he lines up exactly as I do with Northwestern, Illinois, and Wisconsin. He would like to note that in his eyes, there's a very clear number 1 with Northwestern, and then depending on what criteria you're using to grade, that is really how you get your 2 through 7. So Ben goes Northwestern, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Josh goes Northwestern and Illinois at 1 and 2 as well. He lines up with you, though, Greg, with Iowa in his number 3 spot.
Okay. All right, Tim, 4 through 7.
Yeah, my 4, you already mentioned them, Greg. I've got Iowa. They're going to be pretty solid, I think. But the one thing, interestingly enough, and even though A.J. Epinesa wasn't a linebacker, he was a D-end, I think that missing him, that's actually going to make it tougher for the linebackers. So you do have Nick Niemann and Digimon Colbert there who are going to be good players. But I think that without A.J. Epinesa, that might set them back a little bit. But still good enough for number 4. My number 5, I've got Minnesota. And the story with Minnesota is they had a solid defense last year, but they're missing a lot. They're going to really lean heavily on Mariano Sori-Marin. They don't have any more Thomas Barber, and really just as a whole, as I mentioned, they're missing a lot on D, so they're my number 5. Then at number 6, I've got Wisconsin, which seems really, really low. I know you guys were high on them, but there's no Chris Orr, there's no Zach Bound, and I like Jack Sanborn, and they're going to use Leo Chenal, played a little bit the last year, but I just don't know what they're going to do at outside linebacker. And then that leaves Purdue, with all due respect to Bobby Diaco. I think Purdue is a unit that had their struggles. I don't really know what they're going to do at linebacker. They've got a JUCO transfer to Marcus Mitchell they're going to use there. And they're bringing up Derek Barnes up from the secondary, so it seems like they're kind of patching things together. Might be tough for the Boilers this year. So Bobby D has his work cut out for him.
All right, so recap again for me, your 4 through 7.
4 is Iowa. Minnesota at 5. My 6 are the Badgers, and 7 we got the Boilermakers.
All right. Okay. Austin?
All right, I've got Iowa at number 4 as well. Lose Christian Welch, that's a bit of an issue, but like you said, Greg, they're the heart and soul of that Iowa team. I think they'll be solid. I've got Nebraska at 5. I've got a lot of questions. I think Miller and Honus in the middle is solid. I don't know if it's spectacular. Nick Henrich and Keyshawn Green are guys I think you really want to see step up behind them. But outside linebacker has really been an Achilles heel for this team. It needs someone to step up as a playmaker. JoJo Doman's good, but not available as often as he'd like with getting nicked up. Maybe Garrett Nelson grows into that role. So I'm in wait-and-see mode with the Nebraska linebackers. I have Minnesota at 6. Not a whole lot going on there. And then Purdue is in the cellar for me as well.
Okay. My number 4 is Illinois. You guys had them a little bit higher. Still, to me, it's still Illinois, so I've got them at 4. And I line up with Austin. I've got the Huskers at 5. I think there's potential there, but I need to see it week in and week out. I've got the Boilers at 6. I avoid the cellar with them. They do have a couple of starters back that aren't bad football players, and the Gophers for me are 7, just with that one kid back. Barber was so good for them the last couple of years. I think they're going to really miss him in the back end of that. All right, we got about a minute left. What about our absentee votes?
So Ben goes Nebraska in the 4 spot, Iowa at 5, Minnesota at 6, and Purdue at 7. On the other hand, Josh goes Wisconsin in the cleanup spot, Nebraska 5th. He also keeps Purdue out of the cellar, and then Minnesota at 7th. And those are Purdue's first 2 non-7th place votes of this entire little ditty.
We get to wide receivers, it'll be a little different. In fact, that's a great segue. This is the professional in me here. Our next position breakdown will be the wide receivers. We'll get in with Matt Lubick next Tuesday night to talk wide receivers. Purdue will nowhere be close to the cellar. I can guarantee that when we jump into that. What is a linebacker hour, right? Barrett Root and Mike Dawson both with us here on Sports Nightly. Big night for linebackers, big night for baseball with the return of baseball. We got expanded playoffs. We got it all happening here on Sports Nightly on a Thursday night. Fun stuff, right?
This is the Husker Sports Network from Learfield IMG College. You're listening to Sports Nightly.
Well, this conversation should be happening in person. I should be in Chicago at Media Days, one of the McCormick Place or something. That would have been this week.
Greg, we should be talking about whether Mark D'Antonio's successor is going to thrive. We should be talking about Iowa and the racial stuff. We should be talking about Brandon Peters at Illinois. Of course, we should be talking about Scott Frost, because this would be and still will be a huge year for him. And, of course, I would be asking Jim Harbaugh about the progress he's made since it was, 62 points allowed to Ohio State a couple years ago and just 56 last year to the Buckeyes. So good job, Jim. Yeah, I mean, this is always the first day of school whenever we go to Big Ten football media days. And today would be day 2. And, man, it is sad. I'm glad we're still talking, but you're exactly right, man. We should be having some beers and a steak right now.
No doubt. All right, you had an update. Everybody's on pins and needles waiting to hear something. We did hear the Pac-12 today is going to start or attempt to start on the 19th of September. You had a big piece yesterday. What are you hearing?
And by the way, I talked to some Big Ten folks today. Jerry Palm had tweeted about the Pac-12, and he said expect the Big Ten to follow. That certainly could be the case, but the Big Ten folks I just spoke to in the last hour said they're still evaluating various options. Things aren't looking very good. We've talked for a while about this, but just what an incredible undertaking college football is because of the massive number of people involved and the fact that, you can bubble the NBA, you can probably social distance pretty well in baseball. Golf's obviously pulled it off. NFL has a shot because it's their livelihood. If there are no games, nobody gets paid. But these are college students, and it's tough. And, I think right now schools have done a good job of getting the numbers down. But when 20,000 kids return to a campus, it's impossible to tell kids not to be with them. So I spoke to, an influential Big Ten figure yesterday, a guy who's in on all the phone calls with a University of Nebraska doctor, the leading expert in infectious diseases who the Big Ten is leaning on. And he says based on everything he knows, he gives it a 15% shot that Big Ten football games will be played. He said they're just hanging on by a thread. We'll know more in the next couple of weeks. Friday's a big day, Greg, as you probably know. That's when schools can up it to 20 hours a week. They can do some meetings, and, they can do more conditioning. And then schools are open to start practice August 7th. But, man, they want to do it. They don't want to lose $50, $60, $70 million, but it is going to be really tough. The odds are stacked against them.
So is spring a possibility then? Do you move it to the spring? Do you play a pared down schedule then? What do you do? Or do you just forfeit for 13 months?
What I think would happen is, look, the coaches don't want to cancel the season. So even if it's a month from now and things are not looking good, they want to hold on to their players. They want their players to practice. They don't want to just kind of turn them loose and then, the guys are probably going to, in coach speak, make not great choices and start going to bars and, doing stuff that puts their health at risk. So they don't want to cancel. They want to just hang on for dear life and hope there's a breakthrough, hope things are looking better in certain areas, maybe, several weeks from now. So that's what I expect to happen. Hope that you can play 4 games. What if you could play 4 games in the fall? What if you could play 6 games? That would obviously be way better than nothing. Baseball is going to play 60 games. What about 40% of its season? So I don't expect like a big cancellation announcement. I think they're really going to try as long as humanly possible. The spring idea, the Big Ten folks tell me they really haven't talked about that much yet. I'm personally very skeptical about that. I think all the top players would sit out because of the NFL draft. I wouldn't really be comfortable asking, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids to suit it up twice in one calendar year. I think that would be a pretty blatant money grab at that point. So if it's not the fall, I don't think we're going to get football. Certainly some schools would be fine with that, but I think enough would not be cool with that we would see spring football.
All right, very good. Teddy Greenstein with us from the Chicago Tribune. You mentioned baseball. You've apparently jumped into the fantasy world of baseball, right?
So I love fantasy football, and I'm really into it, in part because I feel like, you put in 10 minutes in Friday and you put in 10 minutes in Tuesday picking up players, and you get all the fun of cheering for, every game on TV is interesting. You got somebody you're rooting for, somebody you're rooting against. Baseball, fantasy baseball to me is a chore. So I avoided it for like 10 years. I covered baseball as a beat for 6 years and was really immersed in the game at that point, Greg, and knew all the players. And then little by little, there would be an entire team full of players and I couldn't name one guy. So last year, a friend came to me and said, rejoin our baseball league. And I'm like, fine, just quit asking. It's only like $50 and it's a keeper league. So I figured even if I was terrible, I would tank and just try to pick up some good players. And that's basically what I did. So Luis Robert of the White Sox and different guys like that I was able to acquire. So heading into this year, I have just no desire to do the research. So I said, all right, I also need some material for columns. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm going to say, apply to be my general manager. I'm going to pick you, one of the readers. I need a Theo Epstein. Got a lot of good responses. I think Ben McLaughlin would have been great and an inspired choice, but I went with a gentleman from the northwest suburbs named Eric Toussaint, who is a self-described fantasy degenerate, father of 4. One of his kids plays college basketball at West Texas A&M. He's a funny guy. We drafted last night. I think he did a good job, except for the fact that our first-round draft pick is Clayton Kershaw, who about just a bit ago, turns out, has been put on the injured list. So, my modern-day Sandy Koufax won't be hurling it for the Dodgers.
Oh, that's the way it rolls. And you only have
Right.
another. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who's going to be better this year, the Cubs or the White Sox?
I absolutely believe the White Sox. And
Woo.
even though I think the Cubs are one game higher in the Vegas over-under totals list, I believe the White Sox are 31.5 and the Cubs are 32.5. But Cubs pitching might not be good. I mean, they're relying on Yu Darvish, who obviously has been much better since the early days of his giant contract and all that. But John Lester, loses a little bit every year. Alec Mills is the 5th starter. Tyler Chatwood they're counting on. And, these hitters are just not like they were a couple years ago. So it's certainly possible that Chris Bryant is going to come back and have an MVP-type season. But there's been a lot of drop-off. And certainly the bullpen, could be a problem. The White Sox are MLB's it team this year, aren't they? I mean, A lot of buzz, great young talent. Getting better every year. Added the veteran lefty Dallas Keuchel. That's probably a good move. Tim Anderson is surging, and the aforementioned Luis Robert is hitting 420-foot blasts. So I would absolutely take the White Sox, man. Are you with me on that?
Any team with Aaron Bummer gets my vote. Let's go.
Great.
Also,
glad you mentioned my guy.
They are going to expand the playoffs. They're going to go with 16 teams, and they're going to let teams pick who they want to play. I guess the higher seeds get to pick who they want to play. What do you think of that?
Well, that part I really like because, any system where you're not rewarding the best teams, I think, is inherently flawed. And it's part of why I don't want to expand the college football playoff because, you'd have a team that would go 13-0 thrown in there with a team that goes 10-3, and then suddenly they're all equal heading into the playoffs. So I'm not crazy about expanding the baseball playoff. I didn't think it was necessary, but I certainly understand it. It will allow a team like the Dodgers or the Nationals, that lose a key player to bounce back. So all they probably have to do is go 30-30 to make the playoffs. There's more money. I guess it'll create more excitement down the stretch. So it certainly doesn't offend me. I don't think it was necessary, but in general, I'm in favor of sports that value the regular season and make it more important.
All right, one golf thing for you. Last week we watched John Rahm go win the Memorial. He also becomes the #1 golfer in the world. He thought he won by a comfortable margin of 4 shots. It ended up being 2 because after the round they went back and looked. He had a chip off the green of 16 where apparently the ball moved a little bit. Is golf?
Yes.
Is that too much at times, some of the rules in golf?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, if I'm playing with somebody who gets uptight, I just say, buddy, it's not the bleeping British Open. Look for your ball for a minute, drop where you think it was, and move on. I mean, we're not supposed to be out here for 5 hours. It's not the intention. Obviously, it's very different at that level. But first of all, that Rahm pitch was sick. I mean, you could give, even professionals 10 shots, and they wouldn't have made it or been that close. It was an amazing shot. The whole concept that when you sort of ground your club, that the ball is not supposed to move or that's a penalty is just ridiculous. And there's no advantage gained. On top of it, it's a strange rule. It's supposed to be a one-shot penalty, but he was assessed a two-shot penalty. The second shot was because he didn't replace his ball. I don't know where you'd replace the ball. I mean, it moved, that much and then that much back. So, I mean, come on. It is ridiculous. I don't hate this rule quite as much as the fantasy player who lost $150,000. I don't know if you saw that, Greg, because of those two shots that were lost by John Rahm, but not a fan. It's stuff that, divides the golf world from the average fan who's just watching a telecast, and things like that aren't helpful to the sport.
He's had an issue with anger. Keeping his emotions under wrap have been difficult for Rahm. It looks like he did a pretty good job. Obviously, he did a pretty good job last week, and maybe having a big lead certainly helped him out. I'm
a huge fan of his, and the example that I give is, I'm covering the U.S. Open at Erin Hills a few years ago, and Ricky Fowler goes out and shoots like 65 in the first round. So as a writer, sometimes you want to get something different. Everybody's going to talk to Ricky, so I'm going to try to get Ricky's caddy or his playing partner. John Rahm played with him and had a rough day, shot like 74, something like that. And there were just like 3 or 4 of us following John, and, we're trying to talk to him and kind of thought the blow-off was coming because, that course was playing easy that day. So he basically knew he was out of the U.S. Open after Thursday. And he was great, and he answered every question, and I admired him a ton for that. So, yeah, he gets upset, but I've seen nothing but class from him, in opportunities like that.
The winners of these tournaments since the restart have been really impressive, haven't they? I mean, it's been the creme de la creme to win those.
Yeah, the Rahm thing is great. I mean, you probably read this story where Phil Mickelson bet Colt Knost. We don't know what the amount is, but Mickelson bet Colt that John Rahm would be a top 10 player in the world within a year of turning pro, which is almost impossible. Those guys start out like 1,000. So John Rahm is amazing. I still don't understand how he takes it back that short and produces that much power. But he's a big, strong fella, and to dominate that golf course as he did when all the other pros were wilting.
Well, very good. Stuff. Great to catch up. We'll keep our fingers crossed on football. Enjoy some Major League Baseball here this weekend.
Yeah, so nice to be able to watch some sports, even if my fantasy players are terrible as usual.
On a Thursday night, Greg Sharp concurring with you. Thanks again to Teddy Greenstein for spending some of his Thursday night with us. Time now for us to continue our preseason Top 25.
It's the Sports Nightly preseason Top 25. Tonight,
Ronnie Walker's back in the backfield. Here's the snap. Penix fakes the handoff, looks downfield, fires it to the end zone, and is caught. Watt Fillier makes the catch. Touchdown, Indiana.
Number 22, the Indiana Hoosiers.
And here to talk about the Hoosiers, our first Big Ten team in our top 25, and the first time we can remember having Indiana in the top 25. Zach Osterman of the Indianapolis Star. We're bullish on this team. Are we okay being this bullish on the Hoosiers?
Yeah, I think so. And as somebody who's covered a lot of IU football, in his adult life, I think it's been strange for me to even wrap my head around the idea of IU football with expectations to this degree. And, I think if you quizzed a number of IU football fans, they would probably give you a bizarre blend of optimism and fear just because of how many times they've been snake bitten in the past. But if you look at this roster, if you look at this team, there is depth all over. There is experience all over. Obviously, there are question marks like there are with, just about any team in the preseason, and certainly any team that's not in your top 5, your top 10 kind of range. But I think this is a team that certainly has earned preseason expectation, and it's just going to be a question of whether or not they can live up to it, obviously, as we figure out what the season is going to look like.
You know, you talked about let's talk offense. Weapons, great returning quarterback in Penix. Scott's one of the better backs in the league. Whop Philyor, Husker fans saw a load of him. There's weapons everywhere. How about the offensive line? That looks like an area that there might be some questions about.
Yeah, I think if you're Indiana, the thing you like about your offensive line is if they move and keep Harry Kreider at center, which it seemed like the staff was leaning more and more toward doing before spring camp got shut down. That Kreider started all of last season at left guard. He was a center by trade out of high school. He actually played a little bit of center as a true freshman for Indiana before moving to guard. You know, we'd always kind of wondered, would there be a temptation to pull him back to center? It seemed like the staff resisted it for a while, but they were really toying with it and clearly thinking about it in spring before everything got closed down. If he does move to center, then your center is a senior, your starting right tackle's a redshirt junior, your starting left tackle's a redshirt junior, your starting right tackle's a sophomore who had an outstanding freshman season, Matthew Bedford, who took over when Coy Cronk got hurt. So basically, what I would argue probably the three most important positions in your offensive line are relatively settled. And I think that's the thing that if you're Indiana, you would feel good about. The other thing you probably feel good about is, though you may not have firm answers on your interior spots, your two guard spots, you've got experience. You've got a fifth-year player in Mackenzie Nwora who's been in the program for a long time. You've got a Stanford graduate transfer named Dylan Powell who's played a lot of football at those interior spots, I think both guard and center at Stanford, coming off some injuries, but, you know, by all accounts healthy now, and actually Indiana gets him for 2 seasons. And then you've got some promising young players that you can kind of throw into that mix as well, see if maybe one of them takes strides forward or at least give you some quality depth. There are questions there, probably more than anywhere else in the offense, at least in terms of who your starters are. But I think at the same time, it's not a situation where Indiana should feel like it doesn't have the tools to fill those spots. It's just a question of whether or not you can find the right guys for your number one jobs. And then, of course, as ever, if you can keep those guys healthy.
Again, visiting with Zach Osterman of the Indianapolis Star. We're talking about the Indiana Hoosiers. We have them at number 22 on our preseason top 25. I want to ask you about the tight end Peyton Hendershot. Terrific season last year, over 50 catches. But something's up with him, right? What's going on? What's the latest on Peyton Hendershot?
Yeah, so he was arrested in the offseason in a domestic violence incident with, I believe, an ex-girlfriend. As these things sometimes happen, the details kind of got muddied. He wound up, I believe, pleading. And while it's not clear if he will suffer any sort of suspension, obviously he was suspended from the team while the legal process played out. While it's not completely clear whether, for example, he'd miss games, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he did miss a game or two. But Tom Allen has said that he is back with the team at this point. And in terms of his status in, team activities and what he's allowed to participate in, what the staff is allowing him to come back and be a part of, that part of it is cleared up. I think there's also been some internal punishment for him. And again, while nothing has been announced, I wouldn't be shocked if there was some sort of game suspension for him at some point in the season. But as things stand right now, he will be part of the team.
Gotcha. Let's talk some defense. Last year, the Hoosiers 36 nationally defensively, a bunch of familiar names back. It looks like that could be a pretty solid unit as well. Your thoughts about that side of the ball?
That's the side where there are virtually no questions. And that doesn't necessarily mean Indiana's going to be an elite defense, but it's solid everywhere. And that's, it's the deepest I've ever seen Indiana's defense. It is probably as talented as I've ever seen Indiana's defense. And that goes back to the defense that Tom Allen got into the top 30 nationally in his first season as a head coach. Anybody who's familiar with Indiana football's recent history knows that defense has been its Achilles heel forever. And of course, Allen has, progressively changed that since coming in as defensive coordinator in 2016. But there was even still a bit of a regression kind of in his second season because Indiana's defense was really top-heavy with seniors in his first couple of years. This group, by and large, not completely, but by and large, is basically the young players that Indiana turned to a little bit in 2017, very much in 2018, and then continuing into last season. A lot of guys who played, who maybe are only a redshirt sophomore, a redshirt junior, a true junior, but if you look at the snaps they've put up, if you look at the stats they've put up, they played a lot of football. And so what you're seeing now is maybe the growing pains that Indiana was willing to take from some of those players in 2018 and even at times last season possibly paying off, because this is genuinely a defense that can go too deep everywhere. And I don't know that, again, I'm not suggesting it's going to be the best defense in the league, but I think it could be in that group if we get to the end of the season and you look and you say, okay, Michigan and Ohio State, two just elite defenses. Statistically, they shut everybody down. They smother everybody. Whatever that group behind kind of the top tier in the Big Ten is defensively, I think that could be where Indiana lands. There are some guys that need to take steps forward, particularly on the defensive line, but this is as much talent. This is the best blend of talent, depth, and experience that I can remember Indiana having in all my time covering this program.
Zach, as we look at the schedule, and we don't know if the Big Ten is going to tweak it, change it, but the league games that were on the schedule, wouldn't the Michigan State and Penn State home games be huge if they could get both those? They got a chance to maybe really have a breakout type season for IU football.
That is, I think those are probably the big ones, as we talk about the schedule as it stood before everything changed. And you're right, we're still sort of waiting to see how it sort of settles out going forward. But when you talk about what the schedule looks like in a sort of pre-COVID-19 world, there was a very realistic case for Indiana being 5-1 when it hosted Michigan State on October 24th. And given what Michigan State's kind of going through at the moment with the coaching change and everything, potentially 6-1 hosting Penn State on Halloween. And, there's no program in America that should be more aware of not putting the cart before the horse than IU football. But there is a sort of reasonable – there was, anyway, a reasonable way to forecast that season and see that Penn State game as maybe the biggest regular season game IU football's played in a very long time. And, as we kind of figure out what the Big Ten wants to do with its schedule moving forward, now that we've chopped all the non-conference games off, of course, that's probably going to create more challenges for a program like Indiana. But I think there's still that opportunity, even in kind of a bizarre sort of season, to potentially do something, to potentially, if nothing else, put some really important wins on the board. I wouldn't even put it past Indiana to have a shot in that opener at Wisconsin. But, of course, then that's when you really do start to kind of get into the hypotheticals of what the schedule is going to look like in ways that we just can't know yet.
Yeah, Zach Osterman again from the Indianapolis Star talking with us about Indiana. We have him at number 22 in our preseason poll. Zach, as always, we appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Our top 25 countdown, number 22, our first Big Ten team. Might have surprised some folks, the Indiana Hoosiers, who were coming off of a 8-5 record last year. We like this group. Tim, give me your thoughts about IU.
Yeah, we live in strange times, Greg, for a number of reasons, but the fact that we're talking about a top 25 Indiana team is also one of them. I mean, this is a program that's won, or rather has only been to like 12 bowl games their entire history, hasn't won a conference title in well over half a century, but you look at their roster and you look at the success they had last year, and they are absolutely loaded with talent, and Zach Osterman already kind of went through it, but Michael Penix at signal caller, he took over halfway through last year for Peyton Ramsey, and he's got enough talent and arm strength really to help out the Hoosiers big time. They do have a new play caller, just like Nebraska, Nick Sheridan. Last year he was the tight ends coach, and this will be his first coordinator gig, so that is a little bit of a different dynamic, but I expect that they'll be able to keep things rolling with him. They also have Stevie Scott, the third, at running back. He's scored 10 touchdowns in his last couple seasons. Walt Fillier at receiver, he's a 1,000-yard guy, so he's also a stud. The only thing that is a bit of a concern, I think, for Indiana is that O-line, and Zach Osterman seemed to think that they're going to get that figured out. So you're looking at a pretty scary offense already. Then you switch to the defensive side of the ball, and they're returning 9 starters. So that's not bad. There aren't many programs around the country that can say that. They run that 4-2-5. And then last year they had a shaky defense at times, but then Kane Womack actually took over for play calling for the head ball coach Tom Allen, and they saw some improvement after that. Taking a quick look at their schedule, they're going to open up things against Wisconsin. And so that's their first major test. Well, it legitimately is their first test. And if they can get past the Badgers, then you're looking at a pretty good season. If they stumble against them, things might get a little bit difficult. I mean, they'll likely steamroll Rutgers and Maryland, but then they have to take on Penn State. They have to take on Ohio State, Illinois, and they could have a really good season this year. Who knows? And then after that, it would be Michigan. So you could have a diabolical finish to the season. But they have a lot of talent, and this is a team that we're really high on, and probably for good reason. Now, it's all a bit different. A disclaimer, we made all these top 25 lists when there was still a non-con. Now that there's no non-con schedule, that changes the dynamic just a bit. But still, I think that we have plenty of good reason to be high on the Hoosiers.
And they could shuffle that conference schedule too. That what
True.
we have, it may be a totally different order for them. And in all of our defenses, we put this together before non-conference schedules got thrown out the window. And Zach pointed this out. He says you get past the Wisconsin game, and there was a pretty good chance that they could have been like 5 or 6-1, getting ready to play Penn State at home on Halloween weekend. And I think that was a real possibility. That's what we all talked about. Like, well, they probably lose at Camp Randall to start, but then they probably are going to beat Western Kentucky and Ball State and Connecticut and Maryland and Rutgers, probably even the Spartans at home. And, yeah, a 6-1 football team coming off of an 8-win season from a year ago, and all of a sudden those kids feel like winners. They would have been a handful, I think, for Penn State, but that's all out the window now that the non-conferences. And I'm not trying to make excuses for what we did when we picked these, but the dynamics are different with no non-conference games when you try to look at these teams a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And, the Hoosiers, I was talking at the beginning how weird it is that we're talking about this team, but last year they took a lot of teams by surprise, including Nebraska, and they had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder when they did it. I think that's a game that's going to rub Nebraska fans the wrong way for quite a long time. It really was a surprise to me to see the Hoosiers kind of punch above their weight. But you look at that roster, and it really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. I mean, Indiana, the key difference this year is they're not going to be sneaking up on anyone. I mean, if you look at guys like Michael Penix, Stevie Scott, Walt Fillier, and you aren't taking them seriously, I'm not really sure what planet you're on. So that's the only thing. I don't know if that's going to make a big impact, but you're right. I mean, you look at having Penn State at home. That's a winnable game for the Hoosiers. I mean, the Indiana, they're going to be scarily good this year. Again, tough schedule, but that's for everyone. Everyone's going to have a tough schedule. If you're only playing conference games, the dynamic's different for everyone. So it is what it is.
There's no doubt. They have upgraded their talent in Bloomington, and Coach Allen has done a fantastic job there as he goes into his fourth season as the head coach for the Hoosiers. Remember, he took over on an interim basis, and some pretty wild things that were going on in IU. They rewarded him, made him the full-time coach, and it's paid off for them. He has made a lot of progress with that program. They were 8-4 a year ago. Should have won the bowl game. They had Tennessee dead to rights in that Gator Bowl, ended up blowing that in the end. That could have been a 9-3 Indiana football team last year. That's why we like them so much. That's why we have them in the top 25 at number 22. Tomorrow night, number 21, we'll reveal that for you tomorrow night. Yankees up 4-1 and going to the 6th now in the opening game of the year in Major League Baseball. Austin's had this in the ticker tonight that the NHL, which is going to start up again here in about 10 days, they've added a franchise to their league. Seattle gets an NHL franchise, and they revealed their nickname today, Tim. And maybe you consulted them on this. I don't know. They're going with the Kraken, which are very much like your mascot in SNBL.
Right, exactly. The Cthulhus were taken. They wanted to go with, I'm sure, another mythical beast, and they had to settle on the Kraken. Now, if they were following in Washington's footsteps, they could have just been the Seattle hockey franchise. Apparently, they didn't think that was spicy enough, so they went with the Kraken. And I'm a fan. The logo is pretty slick, actually. It's got that, very kind of minimalist design. It looks like kind of like an S and a kraken creature combined, and I'm a fan. I think hockey in Seattle. I don't normally think of hockey when I think of Seattle. Maybe now I will. But yeah, you're right. I did take the Cthulhus from them. I'm sure they're still bitter about it, but the Kraken's not a bad second choice.
Well, the announcers on MLB The Show, which is what we ran for SNBL, called your team the Krakens. That's what he called your team.
I forgot about that, which is It's interesting that they went there. I mean, it's sort of, so if anyone is familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, forgive me to nerd out for a second. Cthulhu is an underground or underwater kind of beast that lives in this lost city and is supposed to rise up. So he basically is like a kraken. I guess kraken is what sailors used to think were out there. They're basically like giant squids. I think is what they were supposed to be. So I do like the comparison. I mean, I'm not a hockey guy. I suppose I am a Blues fan just from my connection to St. Louis, but Seattle Kraken, I'll keep my eye out on that franchise.
Austin, jump in here with me. Didn't the first thing you thought of was for me when I heard they said that, I'm like, they stole the Cthulhus.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, I'm a little surprised there's not more outrage coming from not just the Hong Kong front office, but the entire league office. I mean, they jump on a train like that. The Cthulhus almost got over the hump for the wild card with the late push. The name heated up. I'm surprised they're not more irate on the.
I expect
a
check in the mail, at the very least. I expect I get to see some of the royalties from the merchandising. That'll help assuage the Hong Kong front office, I think, for a little bit. If not, there could be a relentless battle over this IP. We'll see.
Well, Matt Vasgersian, who voices the MLB The Show, he called you the Hong Kong Kraken all year long. So now they're in Seattle and they're in a hockey franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They must have been spying on us. Yes. I'm sure that we're always cranking out great ideas. So I think that we'll be contacting the Seattle Kraken front office tomorrow with a very strongly worded email, expecting, if at least they're going to commit this, intellectual theft, at least send us a check our way. If not, they're our sworn enemy.
I don't blame you. Absolutely. Yeah. So the Seattle Kraken will be the newest addition to the NHL for the next season, not for this as the NHL, unlike the NBA, they're just going right to their playoffs. Now, they go expanded playoffs, where the NBA is going to play like 8 regular season games and then start their playoffs. The NHL is just getting right to it. NHL was really close to the finish line when everything got shut down in mid-March anyway, but that's here about 10 days away. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. Flicks Picks coming up next.
No sports on this weekend? We've got you covered.
I know everything about film. I've seen over 240 of them.
Time now for Sports Nightly Flicks Picks.
And action!
Okay, time for us to tell you what we've been watching, and I've been anxiously waiting what Tim's going to have, because he's had a lot of time to go get into a lot of different things. So what do you got for us?
I've got a whole back catalog. We could be here all night of me just rattling off all the stuff I've watched. I actually do have 2 recommendations. One of them is a curveball. I actually probably could have had a trailer ready for it, but I didn't tell Austin about it. But folks, if you haven't already seen Hamilton, steal someone's Disney Plus account, sign up for the free trial, then just cancel it already. It's a delight. I was skeptical. I was like, do I want to watch people rap about social studies for 2 hours? Turns out I do. It is delightful. Love it. The other thing I have, though, which is what I really want to talk about, a foreign film, an old black and white picture from the year 1962. It's called Sanjuro, which is directed by Akira Kurosawa. Literally translated to English, that means 30-year-old. It's a samurai movie. and this plot's a little bit hard to explain. I didn't want to get too into the weeds, but it's really, really interesting. It follows a Ronin, which is kind of like a mercenary. He's helping out these samurai who get caught up in this corruption plot that puts their lives directly in danger. It's actually pretty funny. There's plenty of samurai action for you, and really, Akira Kurosawa is famous actually because that was he was a director that basically inspired George Lucas to make Star Wars. He's got a lot of kind of Western influence in there, and so it's good stuff. It's on the Criterion Channel, which is basically like Netflix for pretentious people like me to watch. So definitely check that out if you have the time.
Very good. Austin, what have you been dealing with?
Well, I'm more on the proletariat plebeian end of the spectrum if Tim's our bourgeoisie. I'm still going through Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I hit season 7, so I'm still enjoying that. I'm into season 7 of Parks and Rec, but not even Hollywood, not even Broadway will be able to hold my attention this weekend. There are live sports on. I am eschewing Netflix, Hulu, all the above. Give me baseball, give me basketball, please. It's about time.
Yep, sports that a lot of people care about are now coming back with the MLB and also NBA exhibition going. All right, I like to go watch movies that were critically acclaimed, and I've been wanting to see this for a while because Scarlett Johansson, who a lot of people remember from the Avengers movie, she was Black Widow. She starred in a movie that came out over the winter called Marriage Story. And she was up for an Academy Award for Best Actress. She did not win, but she was up for it. So I had a chance to watch Marriage Story with Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver, who I believe was part of the Star Wars series.
Oh, he was.
Here's a little snippet.
What I love about Nicole, she is a mother who plays, really plays.
What I love about Charlie, he loves being a dad. He loves all the things you're supposed to hate, like waking up at night.
She knows when to push me and when to leave me alone.
He never lets other people keep him from what he wants to do.
Dad, you're too far.
I know. It's not easy for her to close a cabinet.
He's incredibly neat.
She's brave.
He's brilliant. He's very competitive. So I'll tell Charlie what's happening, and Cassie, you then hand him the envelope.
I just get nervous. Well, can you unserve?
What do you mean, like take it back? Charlie and I are getting a divorce, Mom. You can't be friends with him anymore.
Gee, Mom. Charlie Bird. Mom.
Mom? Mom.
What?
It's a movie you've got to be in a right, because it's pretty heavy. It is one of those heavy movies because it's about divorce. This couple who were, he's a director, she's an actress. She was with him. They met doing a play in New York on Broadway. And then she decided to go do a pilot for a TV show out in Los Angeles, which is where she grew up. And they go through a divorce. And there's some really heavy scenes of that. So it makes you uncomfortable at times. But a lot of times, and Tim, I think you would agree with this, those are the good ones, the movies. When they kind of make you uncomfortable, you're like, ooh, they struck a nerve.
Marriage Story is excellent, and really it sounds heavy, and it definitely is. I mean, there are some intense scenes. There's lots of screaming, but the way it unfolds, it's basically a love story, but about divorce. And the director, Noah Baumbach, is actually married to Greta Gerwig, who's also a director, and she's got a lot of great. So really their whole filmography, Noah Baumbach, Greta Gerwig, lots of slice-of-life-y type stuff that's kind of heavy, but also kind of funny as well. And so they're really worth digging into. It's really excellent. Definitely check it out.
That's a well put, because there were some comedic parts to it that kept you not where you're just, like so depressed when you were done with the movie. The ending was odd, but that's okay. I mean, they kind of just left, and so you're like, I guess, well, that's probably how it ended up going. Really good movie, up for some Academy Awards. Don't think it won any. I know she was up for Best Actress, but didn't win it. But A Marriage Story, pretty good thing. It's on Netflix. If you want to go check that out. All right, coming up tomorrow night, we'll continue our preseason top 25. We'll also have our weekend preview is back now that we have some sports to talk about. So we'll have that tomorrow night, our weekend review, and all the day's headlines coming your way tomorrow night here on Sports Nightly. Again, good hour. Thanks to Teddy Greenside. He always stops by with us on Thursday nights. And Zach Osterman, our good friend from the Indianapolis Star, previewing our top 25 team. That'll do it for this hour. Another hour to go. Come on back.